Hello everyone, welcome. My name is Serena. I'm a manager at Books Are Magic, and I just want to start by thanking you all so much for joining us tonight, including those tuning in virtually, as we celebrate the paperback release of Alex McElroy's The Atmospherians, which they will be reading from and discussing tonight alongside Casey Plett. I have the pleasure of introducing them this evening, but before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. Firstly, we appreciate your help in keeping this event as safe as possible, and as such, ask that you please keep your mask on for the full duration of the event, including in the signing line. I guess you can take up yours if you want during the conversation. Cool. The signing line will be taking place at the back near the pickup desk, and you should have received your copy of the Atmospherians upon entry, but if you would like to purchase additional copies to be signed, there will be some available at the front desk where you checked in. So just right back here, this will be the signing line. To those tuning in from our YouTube live stream, first off, hello, thank you for joining us. You can purchase your copy of the book as well as Casey's books via the link in the description, or simply type booksairemagic.net/Atmospherians and it will take you to the right place. Lastly, there will be time for audience questions later, and we will be conducting a hand-raised Q&A, so make sure to prepare your questions for that time. Now, a bit about the book. For those who may be unfamiliar, in The Atmospherians, we follow wellness influencer Sasha Marcus, whose world is uprooted when she is cancelled and doxxed after an unfortunate incident with an internet troll. Enter Dyson, her childhood best friend, who pitches a plan for them to start a cult to reform men out of their toxic masculinity called the Atmosphere. When a desperate Sasha agrees to the plan, Dyson recruits 12 middle-aged white men under the false pretense of job training, and what unfolds from there is a brilliant satirical take on the many wicked webs of our contemporary culture and the power structures it maintains. Alex McElroy is a non-binary writer based in Brooklyn. Their debut novel, The Atmospherians, was a New York Times editor's choice. Other writing appears in Guardian, New York Times Magazine, The Cut, The Atlantic, and elsewhere. Alex has received fellowships from the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, the Tin House Summer Workshop, the Sewanee Writers Conference, the InPerson Foundation, the Elizabeth George Foundation, and the National Parks Service. As mentioned, joining Alex in conversation this evening is Casey Plett, who is the author of A Dream of a Woman, Little Fish, A Safe Girl to Love, and the co-editor of Meanwhile Elsewhere, Science Fiction and Fantasy from Transgender Writers, and the publisher at Little Post Press. She has written for the New York Times, The Guardian, The Globe, and Mail, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Them, and other publications. She splits her time between New York City and Windsor, Ontario. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Alex and Casey.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that I was supposed to read. Thank you so much for coming out. I really appreciate it, and it's great to see all of you here. So I'm just going to read a brief chapter from the middle of the book, or like a third of the way in. I think all you really need to know is that Sasha has a wellness program called Abandon, and that is going to be referred to in this. The night before Lucas DeVry's death, Cassandra and I went out for dinner at a trendy Iberian restaurant in Dumbo. She knew every chef in the city. The ones who mattered, the ones who would matter, and had gotten us a table despite the restaurant's 3-month wait. We sat beneath a blunted red lantern that added blush to Cassandra's natural pallor. She wore black, high-waisted pants and a denim jacket and smelled faintly of berries. We were there to celebrate the first major break in our, according to Cassandra, career. Earlier that day, I had booked an appearance on a network morning show to discuss Abandon. The production assistant was shocked that her email had gone directly to me instead of a manager. "We're booking you as a favor to Candace's daughter," she told me. Candace Heather co-hosted the show. Her daughter was a client of mine, and she had demanded that her mother share my program with the world. "We're going to be on TV," Cassandra kept saying, dragging at the letters as if they were separate words. She lifted a flute of champagne to clink against mine. Cassandra wasn't actually scheduled to appear alongside me, but she spoke with such joy and presumption that I couldn't bear to tell her as much. It would ruin the night. A half bottle of champagne made me swimmy, giggly, but Cassandra ordered another and topped off my glass. Abandon demanded sobriety, so I rarely drank in public. But tonight was a special occasion. Cassandra lifted her flute, a toast to the launch of our lives, to our real lives, to the futures we deserve. Next Tuesday we'll be on TV, and by Wednesday we'll be everywhere. Not just in our bubbles online, but bursting, spreading, expanding, infecting, I joked. There'll be profiles about us, photo shoots. Sasha, they'll say, we need more fire in your eyes. Flip your hair up. Cassandra, cradle this tiger. I want the tiger, I said. Then I get the python. She mimed draping it over her shoulders, made a biting gesture with her free hand. We'll march our animals through the High Line. Times Square, I said. Oh, it's so tacky. I love it. I blushed. There will be books, she said. Self-help is for hacks, I said. Cassandra gagged in disgust. Hack is too generous. I'm talking memoirs, empowering stories of triumph, ghost-written by middling, out-of-work novelists. These ghostwriters, they talk to you, they listen, they expand, and the books, they just appear. It's all your ideas and your thoughts, but you don't do the typing. And you shouldn't. We shouldn't, because the book is just the beginning. The book will evolve into a lifestyle, and that lifestyle will become a phenomenon. And what comes after phenomenon? World domination, I said. She cackled so hard her glass slipped out of her hand and it shattered. The servers' heads swiveled, their eyes hunting for someone to blame. It's only glass, she shouted. It won't cut you unless you take off your shoes. I leaned over the table in laughter. She didn't usually act like this. So vocal, so dramatic, so drunk. People are staring, I said. Of course they're staring. We're stars. It occurred to me then that Cassandra depended on fame to give her life meaning. Anything less would not have met the expectations imposed on her by her family. She was the only child of a glossy magazine editor and a museum curator. Her maternal grandparents had both been in the movies. It was assumed she would succeed, that people would not only see her but look to her as a model of how to exist. No one in my family expected much from me. If I flamed out, anonymity would rock me to sleep in its arms. But Cassandra feared irrelevance the way tourists fear strangers in alleys. For the first time, I pitied her. I incubated this feeling. I longed for it to survive. A waiter brushed the shards into a dustpan. Cassandra said, "Close your eyes." She asked me to imagine a future of plenty and ease, summers on Mediterranean islands, loose gowns billowing in the breeze, lounging on hulking white yachts, how our faces would draw glances on Manhattan's sidewalks, the way our words would wind through the minds of strangers, steady them in times of crisis. Vacation homes in the Alps, photo shoots in Chilean vineyards, luncheons with diplomats, and consultations for Austrian monarchs. She stretched for my hands. You'll be everywhere, she said. Complete and total ubiquity. She made it sound like a good thing. That night, I followed her through the city, weak-kneed with champagne and wonder. I had work the next day, but Cassandra demanded I fling away all responsibilities. You'll call in sick, she assured me. This is far more important than your little day job, your temporary job. It was impossible to not feel important around her. She was friends with every flowering tree, every fire hydrant, every lamp post, every grinning puppy, every brick wall worth taking a photo in front of. She knew the names of weeds sprouting through cracks in cement, the dreams of bodega cashiers. If she crossed streets without looking, cars swerved around her in deference. Dice and I were always in awe of people like Cassandra. City kids. We'd known a few in high school, transplants beset by restlessness and self-assurance, possessed of indifferent magnetism and the will to explore. They wanted in ways we never could. Desire came naturally to them. They were born in its belly. That night, Cassandra led me to underground bars and rooftop bars and garden bars and bars housed in abandoned apartments, and whatever pity I felt for her in the restaurant hardened into handcuffing envy. We ended the night at a club that required a password, delivered forward, then backwards. I regret not dancing more with Cassandra. I regret that, although I drank, I didn't drink to excess and wake up on her living room couch. In the club, I nursed a vodka soda in a tucked-away booth, refusing Cassandra as she begged me back onto the dance floor. My perch granted me a sense of superiority, which I believed I deserved. From this vantage, the club played like a performance put on for my enjoyment. Blades of light swept through the room, confidence welled inside me. I was sure that everything she predicted would come true, the islands and the yachts and the photo shoots. She had given me a beautiful future, and I could do nothing for her. I couldn't even tell her that she wouldn't appear on TV. The Cassandra on the dance floor was already lost to me, already embittered by my success, and I liked looking down on her, thinking more would come of my life than of hers. She gave me a waist-cinching hug at the end of the night. Drinking always made her a little too grippy. Normally, I resisted the intensity of her touch, but there was something gentle in it that night, an obvious pride. "We're doing this," she said, "me and you." We split into separate cars. I posted a photo of us posing in front of the Iberian restaurant earlier in the night. "Big news soon," I wrote in the comments. On the ride home, I scrolled through congratulatory comments, liking as many as I could, to show that I cared, and bottling up an impulse to spill to everyone, begging for me to tell them my news. I tingled with joy, impatient for my new life to begin. Lucas DeVry commented using his latest account. He made a new one whenever I reported him. DevLuke 494293781466 wrote, "You're finally going to put your mouth on my cock?" It was standard of him, unimaginative and vile. I normally deleted his comments and reported, but these weren't permanent solutions. And that night I was drunk on my future. Reporting Lucas DeVry to the social media cops was now beneath me. I felt a responsibility to confront him. No, I wanted to confront him, to stomp him out, to flatten him, to ruin him, to shame him so he never wrote to me ever again. He responded this way to every photo I posted. It wasn't enough to report him because he always found a way back. There was always a new name, a new email to plug in. I wanted him gone, forever. I replied, "I am trying to make a beautiful world, and the world would be so much more beautiful if you and everyone like you were dead." Thank you.
That was excellent. Thank you, Alex.
Yeah, thank you.
So, congratulations on having a paperback version of your book. Today's your pub date, right?
Yeah,
Amazing. How does that feel?
It feels good, and like it's like I'm doing the thing that I already did, but in like a new way. So like it's exciting, but I'm like, I guess there's some bonus content. It's like the DVD that like I think so which is probably great because I used to spend all of my high school cash on DVDs, so it seems only right that I would have like a deluxe edition of my book coming out. Yeah.
You got the deluxe edition. Tell me, like I only have the VHS version.
Yeah. No, well, that's the one from in theaters.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
sorry.
But this has an extended edition book club reader's guide in which I was asked some very difficult questions, and yeah, there are some like real like AP English level questions in the back of this book right now that I like absolutely would have flunked if I had been asked to like answer them myself. So there's that's in there, and I think that's fun. Yeah, and I mean I get a new cover, which I think is great. I get all these little men, as well.
It's a very good cover.
Yeah, it's a great cover. It's just a lot of. It's a very dudes rock cover, which on book covers doesn't happen enough. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I guess you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't see a single Dudes Rock cover actually in this bookstore off the.
Yeah.
Yeah. You heard it here first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the new trend. The splotch is gone. Dudes Rock is coming.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Is this? I have to ask. Is this? So you're the theater version came out last May. Is this your first like in-person launch for your book?
I did have a launch-ish at Wet Spot back in May, which was like a 3-person reading. So this is my first like 1-person in-person reading. So I've done like there's this event that I created called Debuts and Redos, which Daphne Place Andreades is going to read at tomorrow. So
That's such a cool project, by the way.
yeah, in which we bring together 3 readers who debuted during the pandemic, and debuted or had a book come out in the pandemic, and we read together in person. So I did that. That was the first time that I read it, and I read with Jamie Hood and Nadia Owusu, and that was awesome. But I think this is my first by myself reading.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the manicure for it and everything. I literally brought my book with me to, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you look lovely. Your outfit is incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, that's all that matters to writers.
Pretty much. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you really want to make a writer swoon, say nothing about their book, but oh, that outfit you wore to your launch is fabulous. Oh, whatever, done.
Yeah, because the book is so old by that point.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
This old thing?
Yeah. It's like, I don't even remember what's in there. It's
this
is me now. Yeah.
I remember once doing a reading of someone whose book came out 2 years ago, and we were kind of on tour together, and she was looking through her book, flipping through to see what she was reading, she was like, hey, some of this is good. Oh, I read that. Wow.
Yeah.
But speaking of your actual book, which the section you read, and interesting because going through the book again today, I was struck by there's a point where I think it's in chapter 2, where Sasha is talking about her friend Dyson and saying everyone wants to know about Dyson. They always think he's manipulative, but he wasn't really. He listened.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something though about all of these characters are very kind of manipulative in a way. They're all very sympathetic and they're kind of hard to hate. But they all have their own ways of manipulation with each other, especially Cassandra and Sasha, as in that part you read. So, I don't know, do you have anything to say about manipulation in this book? Manipulative personalities?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking to a writer friend last night, Jen, who's here, about the difference between memoir and fiction, and something we were talking about is in fiction you can just make people do the wrong thing, all the time, and that's sort of the goal, a lot of times, right? Is that I guess I'm just really interested in personalities and the sort of conflict that arises out of people trying to convince other people to do what they want. I also think that something about a lot of this book, I'm just interested in how people convince others to do something that is pretty wild, right? I mean, the premise of this book is pretty intentionally absurd. So there is there needs to be, I mean, you can call it manipulation, you can call it convincing. I've been watching a lot of biopics about scammers right now, and it's and seeing them all together, it's the same thing over and over again. It's oh, Elizabeth Holmes did what Anna Delvey did what Adam Newman did, which is just be really manipulative and forceful and persistent. And I think that's something that's coming through and how the characters are talking to each other, and I think they just a lot of times they probably don't even know that they are, right? It's
absolutely.
also
absolutely,
really just the language that they were, I wouldn't even say raised in, but I think okay, I recently bought a book about gaslighting, and in it one of the first things is you may have been gaslit by an ad, and it's yeah, I know, I'm and it's yeah, I've bought clothes online before, Like I don't want to like do I like cancel J. Crew now? But like I mean that's really interesting is like how like an actual like a form of like extreme psychological manipulation is also talked about in something as ubiquitous as advertising, right? Which is the air we breathe, right? So I think these characters are very much steeped in that kind of language, whether it be like, you know, um, manipulation or persistence or like all of it. I think is them just like this is the language they know, and I think it's also like weirdly like a sort of language that we admire in like the traditional vision of like what America is just like keep doing it and like keep convincing yourself like every like part of the like the myth of like I've been watching something about Elizabeth Holmes and like in this fake version of her life, she is constantly bringing up how like Steve Jobs was said no to all the time, but he believed himself, and it's like sometimes like people should just accept that no one believes in them, right? And like I mean that in the like Steve Jobs, he did it, good for him, right? But like maybe Elizabeth Holmes should have like taken like a step back, right? Or like
She probably shouldn't have believed in herself.
yeah like yeah I mean this is going into weird dangerous territory right now, but like I think but we have that myth of like you need to believe in yourself no matter what anyone says, right? And I think the characters throughout deeply believe in themselves, and I was curious about almost like the problems of that, or like when that can really get away from a person, when that kind of like obsessive self-belief, how that sort of like American ethos of like self-belief can become like toxic, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. There's that. That makes a lot of sense. There's a really beautiful scene where I won't spoil it, but there's a really beautiful scene where Sasha and Cassandra, where Sasha betrays Cassandra, and like right up until it happens, you almost feel like Sasha sort of like has not been plotting or has not been nefariously planning to do this. It's just she's gonna do what she's gonna do the entire way.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's brutal, but it's really heartbreaking. I also really love the friendship between Sasha and Dyson. Like the friendship between the two of them felt one of the more like realer and compelling portrayals of such things I've ever read, because like in some ways their friendship is so toxic and it's very like demeaning, and they don't like they kind of are bad to each other, and yet it's also so nourishing, and it's also so like they kind of trust each other and will do things for each other in a way that like kind of is almost like a care that doesn't really show up in a lot of other parts of the book. Like I just found that really, really complicated and gorgeous and true.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean it. So can you tell me anything about friendship?
About friendship?
The two of them,
yeah, I mean, so this was one of my obsessions from the very beginning of the book, is that I was obsessed with like, like I was like, how can I write a book that has like male and female main characters and they don't fall in love with each other by the end? And I was like, and that I think requires that you sort of like faint in that direction a few times, but it's like absolutely the story that I didn't want to tell. And I was really curious about like especially like a lifelong friendship is something that like I've especially felt with like friendships that have been like very dear to me and have lasted many years, is that like there's an assumption of life even as they like lay dormant, which is something that we don't have with romantic relationships, right? Like there's an assumption of a conclusion for something that can be more intense but of a shorter duration, whereas a friendship I think can potentially be less intense over the course of it, right? And I was just like curious about how like what continues to keep people together even after they aren't in the same type of like intensity. Like their childhood was very intense, right? So they sort of bonded over like having a very similar childhood, but like after that, what is the sense that you, I guess like the beholden quality of friendship I was really interested in, and like when that can like and how that sort of like plays out, because like you legitimately care for this person deeply who maybe you don't have the like traditional bonds of like bloodline or like a romantic partnership or something like that. And I was like, what continues to like bring people together? And so that was really fascinating for me, is I think especially just how to make that interesting, because I think like romantic love often exists more often in books, movies, whatever, just because it's more like superficially interesting, right? Because it's like, are they gonna hook up or not? And everyone's like, I want to figure it out. But I think like with a friendship, like if that is stricken from the beginning, then you have to figure out different ways to create tension. And I was really curious about how to still create tension and momentum in a book that is not going to ask that sort of pretty traditional question. Friends are cool too. Yeah. I'm pro friends.
Friendship's just really great. Just really great.
I'm controversial. I'm coming out supportive of friendship.
Oh my goodness gracious. This is web stream. Are you sure?
Yeah. I know, yeah.
Okay. Well, one other thing I wanted to ask. Do you think of this book as a satire? Like, a few people have called it a satire. Do you think of it as a satire?
You know, I am not going to fight the people at marketing.
You can feel free to not answer that question also.
No. I mean, like that is my goal. But the intention is for it to be satire. I mean, I think it's not like, and this is something I've been thinking a lot about, like what really sort of constitutes satire, and is it like a really like absurd, like aggrandizing, like there's like the bawdy sort of satire, right? Like bawdy with an AW, which is not something that I really like that much, right? But I think like there's the satire that I'm more interested in, that like you have to be like, where it's really unclear what exactly is even being made fun of, or like it's a satire that is like absolutely making fun of the person reading it or the person writing it as well. Like I am absolutely not unindicted in this book, right? And I think that that's what most interests me, is like satire that is able to sort of hold up a mirror to oneself, and make you be like, oh, like I can see myself in this book, and I should figure that out. Right? As we were talking about that, like people both ask you and have asked me, like they're like, I just finished your book. Are you okay? Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, no one in this book really gets away with much without giving away the ending. I don't think, anyway.
Yeah. I think that was really important for me too. Is like I don't like people mostly get their comeuppance, but their comeuppance doesn't look like what we might expect it to look like. And that was also really important to me. Like I guess I'm just like, one of my greatest obsessions since when I like first started writing like short stories, like in my MFA, is just like, what happens if you like give someone absolutely what they want, and like how is that like just, you know, how can that make someone miserable, right? To like absolute, like, you know, to actually get that. And I think like being forced to confront, oh, like this is what I wanted, this, and I think that was really important for this book as well.
Makes a lot of sense. I think it really comes through.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Well, no pressure, but what's next? You working on anything new?
I'm working on a novel right now. It's with my agent, so we'll see. And then working on some freelance. I'm writing a piece about all of these scammer TV shows that are about to drop. So that is why.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So that is going to be really fun, and I have things that I'm thinking that I legally cannot say right now, because there's like a flashing Netflix thing that's like, if you talk about this, we will like sue you to the ends of the earth. So like in
NDAs, they're scary.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like it's not like, I remember when I was a kid, like I had a stepsister who worked at a video store, and she would get like a pre-release sometimes, and it would just like occasionally turn black and white and be like, don't share. But like I feel much more threatened right now. Yeah, so like I use my mom's Netflix account, so I had to be like, do not watch this show. Yeah. Anyway.
I'd be scared of Netflix too.
Yeah, they're probably in the room right now.
Probably.
Yeah. So I think it's Q&A time.
I think it is as well. Yeah. Maybe any questions from the audience?
Yeah.
How do you write online existence in social media without coming off as either hopelessly corny or like Steve Buscemi in a backwards cap saying, "Hello, fellow euphorias"?
Yeah. Really important question. I mean, I hope I didn't do that. I mean, for all I know, I am Steve Buscemi. So like it's no longer in my hands whether I am or not. I mean, I think, to be honest, I really avoided it in this book, and I think what's been one of the weirdest things for me is like it's been like put into a class of like other books that are much more like I think internet focused, like Patricia Lockwood's book and Lauren Orler's book, and I think my book doesn't have the same like I see the characters in my book being poisoned by internet discourse and then living their lives like after that poisoning, right? Less than I do see them as people who are always online. Like they care about things, but I think a lot of my focus, what I tried to do was like think about like I mean, it's very easy to be like, oh, like being online is stupid, but like I care when I get a lot of likes, right? And I think there's like a core like fundamental thing about that of like I want to be recognized, and I think if I could connect those desires to like be seen and recognized to this thing that seems so frivolous, then I could make it just about the characters rather than about like being online, and that's just because like I don't trust myself to write about actually being online, because I would absolutely Buscemi it. But I think there are some writers who do that like really really well. Yeah, I'm just not one of them. Yeah. Thank you though. Any other questions? Yeah.
What do you feel like, I don't know, lessons you learned from your writing the first book that you want to take now in your writing?
Into this next book? Yeah. I think something I did a lot in this book was I was like, I'm just gonna see where this like plot line goes. Like, I wonder where it'll take me. And I feel like I have a better intuition of like, it's a sort of thing like in a cartoon where they're like, I wonder what's down that path, and it says like lion on the door. Like I feel like I can see the word lion a bit more clearly now than like I used to be able to. So I think what I mostly want to bring to it is just a sense of like understanding and having more intuition about when I think something is not working, and just figuring out like, is this something that like I think I can fix, or is it something that like I just need to shelve? Also, I think my next book is very different in its focus. It feels much more, so I think that was like a real challenge for me, is like I wanted to do the things that I don't think I mean, everything in this book is perfect, this one here, but let's say there were things that if I were to read the entire book, I would see as flaws. There are things that I definitely wanted to do better in this next book, just like on a like character level, that I think hypothetically I did not do in this first book. So I think like that real challenge of like, oh, like I didn't do this thing well enough, and I hope to like be able to like take these themes and these ideas into the next book. Yeah, so that feels a little vague as an answer, but yeah. Yeah. I saw some other hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any like actual social media figures or public figures who you were specifically like drawing inspiration from, positively or negatively, with the book?
Yeah. Not really. I mean, I was like, I got really into Little Michaela for a while, even though, like, does everyone know who this is? It's like, she's like a CGI influencer, and it's like a very creepy, like, uncanny valley thing, because she'll be, like, hanging out with Justin Bieber, but she's just, like, in a photo with him, and it's like, and, like, for a while, like, no, like, yeah, this is gaslight, because like everyone would be like you'd look at it and be like, she's not real, but she would act like she was, and I was like what's going on here? And like but like she doesn't. I put her in my book, but then I like cut it, because I was like, no one's gonna care, but I think I was most interested in like the sort of like middle managers of influencers, not as like an individual person, but just like as a class of people, which was really. Like, the people who are like, oh, like, follow me and, I might get sent a special spoon in the mail. And like these people who like live off like the spoons that they get sent in the mail, well, like those people were so fascinating to me, because like they're just like doing it for the love of the spoon, right? Like maybe holding out hope that they might like, you know, break out someday. But I also think that like that's, you know, and I can pretend that I know more than I do and be like, oh, but actually, like, you know, with the crisis in labor and the loss of the middle manager, and like no one's working at the factory now, so like, you know, the online middle manager has replaced the like corporate middle manager, and like sure, that sounds good. That's like, you know, a possible answer as well. But I do think that like a lot of us like live, or like a lot of people that I was most curious about is just like the people with like 15,000 followers who like aren't huge but are still doing it and still seem to be getting something out of it. I found that just like a really, really fascinating space. So like a lot of people like that. Yeah. I think I saw a hand over here before I saw you. Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
Oh, it just struck me as a really astute, critical, but also like sympathetic book about masculinity. You know, I wonder how you feel about that now.
Oh yeah, man. No, I mean like something that a friend told me early in this process that I think was some of the best advice that I got was he was like, listen, like I read this book and I can tell from the beginning how you feel about these guys. He's like, and that's propaganda. And he's like, you know, he's like, but he's like, you don't want to write that. He's like, you have to like figure out a way to like write towards like understanding it. Like you might not like what they do, but like I think understanding is like really important, especially in like literary fiction, right? Caitlin Greenidge also had this piece in the Times a few years ago, and I think there's like a line in that where she talks about like an old racist white woman in her first book, and she said like I had a horrifying realization that I needed to love this monster into existence, right? And that I think is like was a line that I returned to a lot. Like I need to like figure out a way to be compassionate with these people, and like when you're compassionate, they can like do whatever they want. They're not real, right? But like I can like let them do whatever they want from a place of compassion, right? And I also think that like the book isn't necessarily a like this isn't like a guide for what to do with men. I think like, you know, the characters at the center of the book, like, you know, they don't have a really good idea for what to do. They're not therapists, they're not social workers, right? So I think that was also on my mind too, is like there can be some compassion because like the people who are trying to like fix the men are so wrong in a lot of ways. So there's like space for compassion because you can see that like, oh, like this isn't actually the right thing that is happening, right? And so I can open up like another there's like a point where you can like see like, oh, like something bad has happened to these people, even though like they're probably not like the best people, right? Or like they've made, you know, a lot of horrible mistakes in their lives. Yeah. So I think that's where that compassion came from. Yeah. Thank you though. Yeah.
So that was the perfect lead in. Your piece on petulant masculinity I saw is now on TikTok being like green screen and discussed. So how does it feel to be a trauma TikTok influence?
So what's really funny is if you look, the first instance of it that I saw was someone sent to me a video of this like super smart young woman like going viral with like explaining what it is. I did not have a TikTok account, so I created one. And there's a comment on there that's like Alex user 1279 that's like, hey, a friend sent this to me, thanks for your summary, and it has no response. So like I just feel like a total freak that like my thank you is out there. Anyway, but like I mean I'm not like looking at it, like I mean I was so humiliated after that I'm like I like can't show my face around TikTok anymore. So I mean I feel really weird about it, right? Because it's like it's absolutely out of my hands in ways that I think the term is probably being I won't say misunderstood, but I'll say it takes on a different meaning from my intention. And I think part of the problem is that I only had 900 words to write about a very complicated thing. So I think like I didn't even get to the end of it in these 300 pages, right? So like to like only have like such a small space. So I'm glad that people are talking about it, and I hope that the conversation around it stays open to rereadings of what the phrase can mean. But I also think it's not something that I like. It's sort of like I did the thing and I'm like out of it right now, right? So like that. But I'm sure like my goal for the rest of the night is to not go on TikTok now that I like know that it's happening. I think it's like it's just not mine anymore, right? Like which happens like with any sort of phrase or like anything, right? Like even this book is not mine anymore, right? So like that, I think that's the only way that I can like sort of deal with it. Yeah, but thank you. I don't know where are we at the
We
end?
have time for one more question.
Okay.
Or zero.
Okay. One more.
This may be like a dumb or very broad question, so forgive me. But you talked about a lot of different subjects you wanted to explore and cover in the book, but I'm curious, what was your like very preliminary initial spark of idea for the novel?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and I think that it's like it was the friendship between the two characters, right? Like a lot of the like when I first there's a chapter early on where Sasha goes over to Dyson's house, and the first chapter from this book was essentially that scene, but with the characters inverted, where like they were essentially Sasha's parents, and it was just like a very realist book that I was just like I just don't want to write this, but I was still obsessed with these characters, right? So like it was the conversations between the two of them is like why are they still friends after all this time? Like what is like to what lengths will this friendship go to? Like how deep is that connection between the two of them? So it was absolutely like those two. There were many of the early pages in this book were just pages and pages of like disembodied like Beckettian conversations between these two characters, just like trying to get their voices right and trying to, so I think it was absolutely that relationship between them. Thank you. All right. I think that's a great place to stop at the beginning.
Friendship.
Friendship. Still supporting it. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's get done.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Alex and Casey, and thank you all for tuning in tonight, virtually or in person. It means a lot that you're here with us and that you're still willing to come out and celebrate good literature. As a reminder, Alex will be signing at the back decks, so please wait to approach them until they've gotten settled. You can also purchase additional copies of the Atmospherians at the front where you checked in, as well as Casey's books. And for those still with us on YouTube, you can find a link to purchase their books in the description. For those in store with us, we ask that you please make your way downstairs once you've purchased your copy so that our staff can begin breakdown, and there's a back exit there as well, and we'll open that up for you. So that's all for me. Thanks again, everyone, and let's give these two one last round of applause.
Thanks.
Oh my gosh, how have you been?
Oh my god, it's so good to see you. I'm so sorry, I missed you after my lunch for a drink. I was so frazzled.
I bet. No, that's okay.
Yeah, but I'm glad you hung out with like Mina and Alex
Yeah, me
and
too. It
Jean.
was so
I
much
heard from
fun.
Mina.
It was so much fun. What are you doing now?
What am I doing now?